Maybe I didn't treat you.
You were always on my mind. Okay. What can you guys are always on my mind, man. It's like 24/7. You guys are on my mind. Sometimes because I'm just thinking of you. And sometimes because you guys call me and I said, well, I guess they're on my mind now. What can I tell you?
We
How's
could change the
everybody doing?
words. We
What's
could change
that?
the word. You are always occupied. You're always occupied.
Oh, that's right. Look, occupancy agreements. You're so
Yeah.
on top of it, it just scares the living hell out of me, Ted. You just need to get your license. Miss Lexa, how are you today? You good? Miss
I'm
Kinsey?
doing well. We should have the OARs in either tonight or tomorrow morning on the place next door. But I talked to the agent today. So it needs a new roof.
Ooh,
Their roof estimate is like $34,000. And then Charles referred me to somebody out of Albuquerque and their estimate is $13,000.
wow. That's just crazy. It's all over the map.
All over.
Well, let's
Anyway,
see.
but I had a talk with the other broker today. I think we'll be able to work out all of the inspection issues and be able to get everything resolved by Friday.
Well, we're going to have some fun ones today because some of this stuff can play right into a lot of the things. I'm going to talk a little bit about just tenant related concepts because we get caught up in that. And I've known a lot of you guys have called me on one time or another saying, well, I've got this tenant in there. This tenant won't let me show the house. And, you know, that's not a fun place to be. Tenants can be somewhat difficult sometimes because why? Number one, they don't really want to move out. So all of a sudden you have a situation that, you know, need to do an open house. Even sometimes some of the homeowners, i.e. Lexa, had that issue that they won't get out. I need you out of here. I don't need you to be floating around here. And there's always the concern that depending on what side of the fence you're standing on, if you have a tenant in there and you happen to be the buyer's broker and they don't leave, a lot of times the tenant can disclose information that may have never been disclosed even to the seller, but they can also make that seller's life pretty hell because all of a sudden it's like, oh, you don't want to live in here because of this and this and this. Or if you're in a condo situation or a townhouse situation, a lot of times they go, well, you know, God, the neighbors here, they're just so loud and you're going, oh man, shut up. So what you really always want to do is make sure that your seller, let me repeat, that your seller is having the communications with their tenants. And there's this cool little form that a lot of people sometimes negate to use. And it's really the consent for photography, but also about open housing. And it gives your seller a benefit of using a form to make them kind of look like, hey, my broker is telling me that we need to use this thing and we need to fill it out. And that form number, just for sake of grins, is 2110. There it is on the bottom, 2110. That's the one that you want to utilize. And let's just kind of look at it real quick, okay? Because it's nothing crazy, but it also protects you as well. And you can say the tenant is currently occupied and fake address here. And whereas the owner of the property intend to market the sale at least through Keller Williams. So all of a sudden your owner who has a tenant says, man, I've got to use this form. My broker wants me to use this form and you and I need to go through it. This isn't necessarily you doing this, you know, because, and I've been in the situation that the seller is telling me, well, would you present this to my tenant? You know, if they're cool and they're nice, they'll go for it. But a lot of times it's really the responsibility of the owner of the property to do it. And really where it comes important, where it's real important is when you start getting in the scenario of photography, this easy one. And you've got to always keep in mind, even when you're talking to your seller and you're listing the property, you know, if they have a Rembrandt on the wall, it's something maybe you don't really want to photograph. Not that many people would recognize what a Rembrandt is, but, you know, knock on wood, I've yet to ever hear of a situation where an individual has viewed a person's home and then all of a sudden they have a burglary. Because if you think about it, all those photographs that we're taking is taking them inside the house, what these people have. So you got to always remember, even telling your seller, just in a regular listing, hey, man, you need to make sure that you are putting away those valuable items there. You don't leave that turquoise jewelry all over the, the dressing table or whatever, because that could be a problem. The same thing goes on with tenants. And again, this is an important one. So your broker or your owner can sit down with the tenant and say, hey, look, man, we're going to come in here. We're going to photograph this house. And I had a guy that was renting a property here on Tano. And this guy was like a guitar collector. And he had all these wonderful Fender guitars from way back. They were worth a ton of money. And I'm like going, no, we really don't want to photograph all that stuff. And, you know, it was great. But the last thing I needed to do is someone to break into that house and steal the tenant's guitars. So keep in mind, this is just a very simple form that you can show your seller and say, hey, you need to sit down with your people here that they consent to allowing me to photograph the house, or when you hire that person. And you can see it right off the bat. It doesn't say anything about the broker. It says the tenant's initial to allow the broker to photograph the interior of the property. Okay. Another one you can see here, this helps a lot. If they use it right, tenant will notify at least 24 hours in advance brokerage is taking photos. Okay. That also starts putting it in their head when you're going to be doing showings, that if they need a 24-hour notice, this is that communication that you need to have. And you need to really embark on your seller. If I'm going to sell this property, I need to have consent, and they have to understand that when I get a call in 24 hours, we're going to show it. And I know we've all been put in place. I certainly have. Then you show up and the tenant says, well, nobody ever called me. We have the systems with showing time to call, but it doesn't hurt to have their phone number to text them saying, just reminding you that today we've got a showing. And in this case here, I said open house consent. So they throw them in there together, which is kind of nice. Okay. The brokerage conduct the open house will allow the prospective buyer tenants to inspect premises. Such open houses may occur. And in this case, I put every Sunday starting August 29th until sold. It's just, or you could put in there, August 29th, September 5th, September 12th, whatever days you want to do it. It's giving them notice and it's them signing off on it. Again, their consent on that. States there, if no specific, if not specified, the owner manager shall notify the tenant at least 3 days in advance of any scheduled open houses. So if you're not going to do that, this again, they're consenting the tenant in there, and it's a relationship, because we've all been down that road. Tenant agrees to be received notification by text messaging or email. Okay. A time that you may be doing them. If you're a person that does them 10 to 4, or if you do them 1 to 3, whatever it is, take the time to do this form. So that's a simple one. Any questions on that particular form or issues that they may have had one time or another with a tenant situation? They're always perfect, right, Barry? The tenants just say, come on in whenever you want. Okay. All right. Any other questions on any tenant issues with having a consent form? Nope. Okay, let's move on.
Number of the consent form.
Well, I'm sorry, say that again.
The number of the consent form.
Okay, one more time. Let's see, I'm about ready to dump it. That consent form number is 2110.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, here's the next one. How about the estoppel? Anybody remember the estoppel agreements that we used to have way back when? This is again another form that will help you, because many times people will say, well, I've got a tenant in there, and you'll ask them, well, do you have an agreement? Oh, we have an agreement, but we're month to month now. Did you communicate that to your people? What is their vacate date? What is their notice date? So again, this form here has really been designed to help your seller. There you go. You got the tenant, Mary and Tom Jones. They're the tenants. Landlord is Roger Moore. Name of the address, blah, blah, blah. It's a little good, quick little questionnaire, which really brings up a lot of questions going along it. So you have the names of the tenant, the rental agreement is to Mary and Tom. And do they have any kids or whatever? You put their names in there. When did the rental agreement start? Well, it started way back in 2020, but check this out. When is the last day of the rental agreement? You may or may not have in the actual agreement, but I'm going to state just for grins that this was actually done on the 1st of July. So they're still living there, right? So apparently there was some kind of conversation or some kind of supplement. And in this little example, I said they're going to be living there month to month, starting on July 1st. Okay. And what does that mean? Well, you go through the whole process. Are there any verbal or written agreements or understandings to modify the rental agreement of a future date? This is the classic one. Oh yeah, we've told them. Really? Well, when did you tell them? I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that, well, we told them. And of course, all of a sudden the tenant is going, they never told me. What do you mean you're closing in 30 days? I'm not moving out. You didn't tell me. And there's a lot of issues right now with the whole COVID thing. Have you guys all paid attention to the recent one? We just got it today. Well, if you haven't, take a look at what SFAR just sent out. I'm sure that they've done the same up in Farmington. Well, there's been an extension on the eviction notice. People ask me all the time, well, what does that mean? Well, if you are within the ability to receive funds from the federal government for your rent, well, you're supposed to use that for your rent. Problem is what I've heard is that money is going to the client or to the person who says, I need rental assistance, but it's not getting to the landlord. You know, they're living off it. So there's some issues that are going, they're trying to get it all cleaned up. But at the very least, they may actually been out of a job because of COVID and so forth like that. So it just complicates things. This particular one said, and we have it in writing now, is there an understanding to modify the rental agreement? Yeah, 30-day notice to vacate. It's there. And what is the current rent is $28 and they're supposed to pay it monthly. This form gives you the ability for them to sign off for the landlord. They're going to sign off on this. So there's no hidden secrets that nobody ever told me that I had to move out. Again, he'll say, have you paid your rent in advance? No, we didn't. Have you paid a security deposit? Yes, you did. If you answered how much? 28. It's basically just a summary for you as the broker to have an understanding of what their lease agreement is. None of us are in property management, at least most of you guys here. So we got to have an understanding of it. Okay. This is where it gets, and I purposely highlight, you can see tenant and landlord, initial off on them, every one of those things. Okay. Other things within it, do you have an option to renew the lease? In this case, it said no. What's the day rent due is the first, blah, blah, blah. This is where things get dicey. Is the rent current? If not, how far in arrears are you? On this example, I said, I'm 2 months behind. Wow. If you're in the arrears, have arrangements for payment of the arrears been made by the landlord? Oh no, I didn't tell the landlord, but if so, I'm going to have the COVID rental assistance to help me. And this is where things really get, they get off the rails, because we're having difficulty trying to have people leave right now. If they have no money coming in, they're renting the property, they're renting the house. Man, how do you get them out of there? You want to sell it. So there's some things that we may potentially be able to do. You might be in a scenario where the person who's selling the property, you sell it to another person who's into the investment. Say, you know what? I believe these people that they're going to get the rental assistance. I'm willing to take the debt, blah, blah, blah. There's all, 21's ways I was going to say skin the cat, but I get in trouble every time I say that. So I'll leave it alone. But you can also see things that are in there, because these things disappear. Here in writing, what appliances, if any, are included in this rental? Okay, the refrigerator, the cooking stove, oven, washer, dryer. You won't believe how many times people are renting houses and they may live in Timbuktu, the sellers. And you have it written down that the refrigerator, the cooking stove, all the appliances belong to the owner, to the landlord. They live out of town. They're kind of expecting you to keep an eye on things. You close, you go over to the house to let the new buyers in, and guess what's gone? And nothing in writing to state that that belonged to the seller in the eyes of the tenant. I many years ago ran into a scenario that the tenants had been there for a number of years, and their refrigerator crapped out. The landlord says, "Well, just go buy one, and I'll reimburse you." So they went out and bought it. They lived there a couple more years. Never was quite certain if he ever did indeed reimburse them. They said no. He said yes. When they moved out, they took the refrigerator with them. Problem was, I had sold the property with the refrigerator to be there. Guess who bought the refrigerator? Not fun. You know, it was one of those kind of deals that can blow up on you. So again, this kind of form works out to your benefit a lot. Same thing about pets. Do you have any pets? Yes, 2 dogs and a cat. All these kind of things. Who's in charge of the maintenance? Okay. And then at the same time, this is an opportunity for your tenants to say, you know, is there anything that needs to be repaired? Yeah, the garage door's been falling off the rails for the last 6 months. The landlord doesn't do anything about it. So even though they seem to be, God, how many more forms can we do, Tom? A lot of these forms are going to be to your benefit, so you have a greater or better understanding of what the tenant's responsibilities are or not. And you can see again, it says the tenant signature and the owner's signature. Push this form on to your seller. You know, unless you're in a scenario, different little scenario that you've got to take care of it for them. But at the very least, try to get the seller to do this, because in reality, they're the ones who have the agreement with the tenant. Okay. It does ask for the brokerage here. If indeed you happen to be a property manager one. Okay, you can fill this out, but don't worry about it. The reality of all of that is you want to use form 6103, and you want to use it to the benefit of your seller, so you have better understanding of it. So questions, answers? Okay. Anybody run into any issues with that kind of stuff in the past? With tenants? Was that Pam saying I am a tenant, or what did she say? She's taking the refrigerator with her. Good for her. All right.
Yeah, I've got one it's not a huge issue, but listed a property Friday or Saturday, and it sold pretty quickly. The owner had rented the property, but there was no tenant in it. And we did not list it as an income property or a multifamily or anything like that. It was single family residential. But the buyer asked, what was the rent, you know? And we told them, you know, prior to them making an offer. Well, now they want proof, right?
All right.
We would like to see proof of, you know, this rental income. Well, it was a handshake rental agreement, you know, there's no lease. We'll see what they have to say.
Well, and utilizing this estoppel agreement, it could have been written down and signed off, consented that indeed that's what he was paying.
Yeah, but there was no tenant.
There was nobody in there.
Yeah.
I love it. So, okay. So those are those little Mickey Mouse forms that, you know, we all kind of blow away. We don't think about, you know, there's not too many classes that talk to you about estoppel agreements or talk to you about that, for that matter, even the occupancy. And I wanted to go over to the occupancy kind of again. We touched on it a little bit last week, but I wanted to go over it in a different way of how the occupancy agreement can be utilized as leverage. How you can utilize that in a market that we're all dealing with today, because we all know that we have potential good sellers and they want to sell their house. Here in Santa Fe, I know there's a lot of people retiring, people saying, God, I really would like to sell my house. I want to move back home where my kids are living, but they're fearful. And what's their biggest fear? Oh my God, if I sell, where am I going to go? There's not enough time for me to go find another house. Well, that's where the benefit can be on both sides of the fence. If you're handling the buyer and you're able, you can put together a sweet offer by saying and communicating to the other broker, you know what, my people aren't in a fired hurry. They're willing to pay rent for another 30, 60, 45 days. Let them live there, let the seller live there. You talk about a comfort zone when you're the person who's selling the property and you just got an offer with a lease back to your own house for a month or whatever it may be, so that you can go find another property. Tremendous leverage, tremendous leverage. I've seen more and more of that. So let me just show you one that I put together this morning. So the assumption is, let's see, is this the right one? Yeah. That the house closed on July 15th in this case, okay? And you basically are representing the buyer. So within your agreement, you say you're willing to lease back the property up to the 30th of September if they need it, to give them enough time. So here we go. Mary and Tom Jones are the buyers. Roger Moore and Diana Ross are the sellers. This is the property and so forth. But here's the difference, the possession date. Notwithstanding the closing of the transaction as set forth in purchase agreement agrees that the seller may continue to occupy the property until September 30th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Okay. So what are we really saying? If, of course, we're already in August, but let's just say that it happened that the day of closing was on the 15th, or maybe the 20th, whatever, we'll say the 15th. And they're going to live in that property, okay, until September 30th. So that's 105 days away. That's, 3 months. It's not unheard of. I've seen, I know that I think Dan did one in Las Campanas for 90 days. Gave people that $1 million property. So try to make it reasonable. Deposit, seller will pay a deposit of $500. And sellers will pay the buyer, the people who just bought it, in this case, $50 per day, okay, excluding the funding date. So 105 days at $50 a day comes out to about $5,200 that they can make. That's a real hard number. So think about it in that terms of saying, is that a potential negotiating tool? I got $5,000 I'm willing to give up for you guys to live in that house. Plus, maybe that's a reduction or whatever it is when you're actually doing the deal. But the truth be said is that you can use this as a leverage tool to say, you know what, guys, we're not in a hurry. You need an extra 30 days, you got it. You live in your own house. It also gives you a holdover clause, which is $50 extra per day if they don't move out. Now, this doesn't mean that they can, be squatters there for the rest of their life. That does not serve as agreement of the buyer to extend the occupancy agreement. All that means is, oh my God, our truck didn't show up. It's not going to show up for 2 more days. We need to stay there. So 105 days go to 107. It's all it is. It's a simple one. The toughest ones that I always run into is, where do they pay these people? Whatever you do, do not become the person of, make sure all the payments are delivered to Lexa. she'll get it to us. Don't go there. I've seen people use the title house if the title house is willing, okay? Or they got an address, or, you know, my brother-in-law will come by, he lives there. But for you as the broker, do not put yourself in the position that you're the person collecting the money. The biggest issues you guys know that I run into all the time is when we all have a tendency to, you know, be that servient broker, always willing to help people. And before you know it, you're caught up on it because something happened with the occupancy agreement, and now they're pointing the finger at you. All you are there is to provide this vehicle. All right. Further down here, seller agrees to pay all expenses connections to the occupancy, including but not limited to the utilities. So the seller's still on the hook. But where it does change is the actual policy of insurance, because the buyers are now the owners. And the sellers should have some kind of renter's insurance at the very least. Okay. It's a simple agreement. They have access just like anything else, and they can terminate. They can peacefully deliver the property earlier. You know what? It only took us 15 days. Lexa Carey was out there. She found us a house, bada bing. We had cash in our pocket. That's the big plus, because they've already closed, right? They got the money in hand now. So there's a big plus to doing that. And it follows all the way down here, not to read the entire agreement, pretty much like a purchase agreement itself. Signature of the buyer, signature of the seller, and it's done. Now, the point being, I really advocate that the better place to be is the seller doing the occupancy agreement. I prefer that. I have been on the other side where the buyer may have closed their property a little early, and they're going to wait another week before the seller's house is going to close. There's exception to the rules. But why do you think that I'm not real big on letting the buyer have the occupancy agreement ahead of time?
Because they can find things wrong with it.
Bada bing.
Speaking from someone who just did that.
So did you run into that issue?
No, we did not. I
Good.
knew what we were getting into, and so we were good with that. But yes,
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And I've been down that road. Man, I don't know, maybe I'd say maybe well over a year ago, I did an agreement with Jam. Thank goodness it's in-house. And my clients who I had at the seller of their property closed early. So they're stuck. Where are they going to go? First question in their mind, well, do you think they'll allow us just to move into the new house before we close? Or can we at least maybe just move our furniture? This is another good one. Can we move our furniture and our belongings in the garage? Well, let's get an occupancy agreement. What's that? Well, you're going to pay for it. Now, it was a little bit of an advantage because they had nowhere else to go and they really wanted this house. And there happened to be friends of mine. And my goodness, man, I knew it was going to happen because it was a house that needed some love. And it wasn't the first night I didn't get a phone call. Tom, guess what? What? The bathroom tub does not drain properly. Really? Well, put a little Drano down and see what happens. Week later, Tom, these windows just don't shut well. Yeah, we had that inspected, if you recall, and we got credited for the windows. So those are the kind of things that you run into constantly. So I really, really would tell you with caution, the buyer's occupancy agreement is a little trickier, particularly if they're going to go moving into the house before it actually closes, because that's when times can stir up a little bit. It's not that you are trying to avoid any issues, but it's a whole lot different when they actually have signed their name, the money's in the bank and the whole bit, that they go, well, it wasn't a perfect house. But in the meantime, when it's not theirs and they move in there for a week or longer, it's a little bit more of a headache. The other way around, as I said, and using it as a leverage tool seems to work pretty well. But just be careful with occupancy agreements. None of us are property managers. So don't act like a property manager. In other words, you're not picking up fees, you're not doing that kind of stuff. It's really kind of an agreement between the seller and the buyer. So that's kind of the big ones for the day. So that was a pretty painless one. Yeah, you got questions, Alexa? Okay,
So I have on the deals that I have going now. So my buyer who's buying a place up in La Masia, we did an occupancy thing for her to stay in up to 30 days past the close date.
okay.
She might get out early. She might not. It just depends upon the timing of everything after close. But my buyer is now wondering if there's a place on her property that he can store stuff after close while she's still in it, like i.e. the garage. There's this like massive 2-car garage. Can she clean out one side and can he move some of his stuff in so he doesn't have to get moved twice and get a storage unit?
So he's the owner?
At close, he would be the owner.
Yeah. So at close, if she's in agreement, it's his house.
Okay.
Yeah, that's his house.
Even
And
though
he-
there's the agreement for her to stay for an extra 30 days.
Right, yeah. And I mean, that's going to be an agreement that they've got to agree upon themselves, because he's technically the owner of the property. And he is willing to do a occupancy agreement for her to live 30 days within the house. But then that's going to have to be one of those little situations that you have to say, hey, look, he's willing to let you live in the house, but he needs the garage.
So he didn't bring this up until, of course, after we like signed
Of
off on the
course. Of course. So you can always amend the occupancy agreement as per the occupants. Of course, I know who you're talking about, sweetheart. So I get it. And those are those kind of things that we were talking about yesterday about the phone. Can they be friends? Yeah. You know, it's always scary.
And I talked to Natalie, I talked to the other broker, and we like totally are on the same page, no problems.
Okay. What had happened is that, not trying to divulge any of her information, but the buyer and seller happened to meet each other. They just thought they were just the greatest things in sliced bread. They really liked each other. And then
Not that way though.
well, not that way. Well, that's what they say. They always start that way. And then you can, well, we're friends now. Can we talk? The deal isn't closed yet. So, you know, to me, it's that foul flag that you see, you know, it's a yellow flag. Be careful, because once they start talking, you know, sometimes friendships fall out real quick. So you've got one there it's just probably creating an amendment and having her understand. I don't know how much stuff does she have in that garage, Alexa? Lots.
I mean, it's huge. It's really more like a 4-car garage, but like a 2-bay thing.
And would there be enough room, or does she have it filled up too?
Well, oh no, she's got it filled up. But if she like, but there's a whole, on the other side of the property, there's a whole RV.
Yeah,
It's not like fully enclosed, but it's
a shed,
like a RV car park
car park.
type thing.
Yeah,
And that's empty.
okay.
And so that
Well,
could work.
that
And
could
she's
work.
got a she shed that also doesn't have much in it that could work.
A she shed. Okay, that's cool. All right, yeah, work through it. So
Okay.
that, you know, these things are those kind of little miscellaneous forms that nobody else talks about that, you know, it's good to have. Those are the ones I get a call, you know, how do I use an occupancy agreement? Be careful with the occupancy agreement. I lean a little bit more when it's the seller who wants to live in their old house that they just sold. It's smoother, a little easier to deal with. And when it's the buyer who wants to move into their new coming house, but hasn't closed yet, that's where the issues pop up a lot.
Yeah, the after close, it would all be after closing anyway. So I feel okay with it.
Cool. All right. Any other questions relating to these three things?
Well, Tom, 2 things.
Yes.
We have 60 storage units down here in Ruidoso, and the market is pretty active. And I get 2 or 3 calls a day from somebody looking for a storage unit. So you know what that means, if somebody's in transit.
Right.
But anyway, we have, 60 of them and 3 or 4 calls a day looking for a storage unit. So it's kind of this living in the garage business gets to be kind of relevant to trying to do something to get it moving along. And the other thing that have been concerned about is the rental, the no eviction business and the money being misapplied, and where the heck is the landlord's mortgage in all of this? How are they
Well, that's
doing that?
Well, that's some of the issue that really, and even the National Association of Realtors got involved with this new bill of this extension of this rental assistance. Is it wasn't so much that people weren't getting it, because they were. The problem was, how were they utilizing it? Were they, not everybody, let's not throw everybody in the same bucket, but there were those few people who said, screw it, I need to feed my family before I have to pay rent. So it isn't cleaned up 100% yet, but we're back into it. I think now they extended it till October. So, it's a tough call where everything is right now, but, I keep a close eye on it, and hopefully you guys are doing it too. Google that stuff, because if you're dealing with a client who has a renter in there and they're not paying, it's not just a slam dunk now, but immediately saying you're evicted. You're not paying me 30 days because, now the government's involved. So hopefully things will smooth out. John, are these your units themselves that you personally own? Did I get that right?
Yeah, the storage units.
Good for you.
We have 60 of them, yeah.
Man, that's a piggy bank
Like I
all
say.
day long.
You'd be surprised. We're having trouble with collections, Tom.
Oh
We
my
really
God.
are.
Oh my God.
People have moved to Midland, go to work in oil patch and so forth, and I think that crap wasn't worth saving in the first place.
Mm.
And walking away from it. Most of them we open are garage sales, you hope.
Well, I see on
There's
that
all that's
TV,
in them.
I see on those TV programs, you can just buy a whole locker and maybe you're going to get treasure. I go, oh, that looks fun.
Yeah, so far that hasn't happened. The worst I've ever had is I opened one up and found 4 40mm anti-aircraft rounds in it that were live.
Oh God.
Fortunately, I was an ordnanceman in the military, and I knew what the hell I was looking at. But
Oh,
that was a little bit of a shock.
Not fun. Not fun.
No.
All right, guys. Any other questions in reference to the occupancy agreement or the consent forms that I talked about today?
I have one quick question. What happens if Michael wants to see if he can move stuff in before the close date?
He'll have to do an occupancy agreement because he doesn't know it yet.
Occupancy, like a,
Just like what we talked about, because the seller, but he's as a buyer, going to rent from her.
just checking, just in case.
Yeah, well, I know Michael's with your, I've gotten pretty intimate with this guy, so I can get it. He'd probably ask that question. All right, we'll see. Okay, anything else, guys? Are we good? Okay, guys, and we shall see you at 3 o'clock. Until then, hasta the next time. Thank you, Ted, as always. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.